Picture a city unlike any other in the ancient world: wide streets laid out in perfect grids, advanced drainage systems, and towering structures built with precision that rivals modern engineering. This wasn't Rome or Athens. This was the Harappan civilization, flourishing over 4,000 years ago along the banks of the Indus River. Yet, despite their incredible achievements, one mystery has stubbornly resisted all attempts at solving it: their script. Carved into seals, tablets, and pottery, this ancient writing system, comprising over 400 distinct symbols, has remained silent, its secrets locked away for centuries. Imagine holding a message from the past, one that could rewrite history, but lacking the key to understand it. That's the frustration archaeologists and linguists have faced for over 100 years, staring at these enigmatic symbols, knowing they're just one breakthrough away from hearing the voices of a lost world. What makes this puzzle even more tantalizing is the sheer scale of what we don't know. The Harappan script isn't just a few scattered symbols. It's a fully developed writing system, one that would have recorded everything from trade agreements to religious rituals, from epic tales to mundane grocery lists. But without a Rosetta Stone, without even a single bilingual inscription to give us a foothold, these symbols have defied every effort to crack their code. Some researchers believe it's a form of proto-writing, while others argue it represents a complete, sophisticated language. The truth, we still don't know. And that's what makes this one of history's greatest unsolved riddles. Today, we're diving deep into 25 of the most baffling questions surrounding the Harappan script. Why do some symbols appear only in certain regions? Could the script encode multiple languages? And what if the key to deciphering it has been hiding in plain sight all along? This isn't just about solving an ancient puzzle, it's about unlocking the untold stories of a civilization that shaped the ancient world. So join me as we peel back the layers of time, piece together the clues, and venture into the heart of one of archaeology's most enduring mysteries. The answers, when they come, could change everything we thought we knew about human history. The first riddle takes us straight into one of the biggest roadblocks in deciphering the Harappan script, figuring out which language family it even belongs to. Without a bilingual text, something like the Rosetta Stone that unlocked Egyptian hieroglyphs, linguists are essentially working in the dark, and here's where things get messy. The symbols could represent a proto-Dravidian language related to those still spoken in southern India today. Some patterns in the script, like the frequency of certain symbols, hint at similarities with early Dravidian grammar. But then there's the competing theory that it might be an early Indo-European language, part of the same family as Sanskrit and Greek. This would rewrite our understanding of how Indo-European languages spread, suggesting they arrived in South Asia far earlier than we thought. But what if the script doesn't fit neatly into either category? There's a third possibility, that it represents an entirely isolated language, one with no living relatives. This wouldn't be unheard of. Sumerian was once a linguistic island, unrelated to anything else before it faded into history. If the Harappan script is similarly unique, decoding it becomes exponentially harder. Imagine trying to solve a puzzle where every piece is blank, no reference points, no comparative texts, just pure guesswork. That's the reality scholars face when staring at those 400 mysterious symbols. Adding to the confusion is the lack of a long, continuous text. Most inscriptions are short, just a handful of symbols likely used for administrative seals or trade markers. Without a lengthy passage like a poem or a royal decree, linguists can't analyze sentence structure or recurring phrases the way they could with, say, ancient Greek or Akkadian texts. It's like trying to reconstruct an entire novel from a pile of scattered book titles. And while some researchers have claimed breakthroughs proposing translations for individual words like fish or plow, none of these have been widely accepted. Without consensus, the debate rages on, with every new theory sparking fresh controversy. So where does that leave us? The truth is, until a bilingual inscription surfaces, or until a radical new approach cracks the code, the language behind the Harappan script will remain one of history's great linguistic enigmas. And that's just the first riddle on our list. Now let's tackle another head-scratcher. Why are nearly all Harappan inscriptions so frustratingly brief? Unlike the sprawling epics of Mesopotamia or the meticulous records of ancient Egypt, the average Harappan text contains just 5 symbols. That's shorter than a modern tweet. This length raises immediate questions. Were these fragments of something larger, now lost to time? Or were they always meant to be this concise, functional markers rather than elaborate narratives? One compelling theory suggests these inscriptions served as administrative tags. Think of them as ancient barcodes. Many appear on seals, likely used to stamp goods or clay tablets, implying they identified merchants, commodities, or trade routes. Picture a bustling Harappan warehouse, ceramic jars filled with grain, bundles of cotton, ingots of copper, each marked with a tiny seal bearing those cryptic symbols. If true, their brevity makes perfect sense. You wouldn't need a paragraph to label a shipment of barley. A few symbols would suffice, but here's the twist. Other ancient civilizations used short inscriptions for trade too, yet they also left behind lengthy legal codes, religious hymns, and royal decrees. Why hasn't a single Harappan equivalent surfaced? Some scholars argue these longer texts may have been written on perishable materials, palm leaves, bark, or cloth materials that crumbled away in the humid Indus Valley. It's a haunting thought. Entire libraries of Harappan literature disintegrated into dust. Alternatively, maybe the script wasn't meant for literature at all. The symbols could represent an early form of proto-writing, not a full language, but a system of coded signs understood only by a select few. Consider the Vinča symbols of Neolithic Europe or the markings on ancient Chinese pottery, clusters of signs that likely conveyed meaning without constituting a true script. If the Harappan symbols operated similarly, their brevity wouldn't be unusual, just enigmatic. Yet doubts linger. The sheer number of distinct symbols, over 400, suggests a complexity beyond simple ownership marks. And intriguingly, certain sequences repeat across different sites, hinting at standardized phrases, perhaps titles or deities' names. It's as if we're overhearing whispers of a lost language, just loud enough to tease us with the possibility of meaning, but too faint to decipher. Until a longer inscription emerges, perhaps hidden beneath the silt of the Indus or buried in an unexcavated ruin, the true purpose of these cryptic fragments remains a riddle. Were they the footnotes of a grander narrative now vanished, or were they always meant to be this succinct, their full meaning locked in the minds of scribes who took the secret to their graves? Either way, their silence speaks volumes about the gaps in our understanding of this astonishing civilization. The absence of long texts from the Harappan civilization is one of its most baffling contradictions. Here was a society capable of meticulously planned cities, standardized weights and measures, and intricate art. Yet they seemingly left behind no epic poems, no legal codes, no royal proclamations. This glaring gap forces us to confront two possibilities. Either these documents existed and were lost, or they were never created in the first place. And both scenarios raise profound questions about how the Harappans communicated complex ideas beyond simple trade records. Let's start with the first theory, perishable materials. Imagine if every book, every letter, every government record from ancient Egypt had been written on papyrus that crumbled into dust within centuries. That's essentially what might have happened in the Indus Valley. Unlike Mesopotamia, where clay tablets baked in fires survived for millennia, the Harappans could have used organic materials like palm leaves, birch bark, or even cotton cloth materials that disintegrate rapidly in the region's humid climate. We know other tropical civilizations, like early Southeast Asian cultures, wrote on palm leaves and almost nothing survives. Could the Harappans have faced the same fate? It's a haunting thought that an entire literary tradition evaporated, leaving only the most durable inscriptions like seals and pottery marks as cryptic echoes. But there's a twist. Even if perishable materials were the primary writing surface, why haven't we found at least one longer text on clay or stone? The Minoans of Crete, for example, wrote on clay tablets but also inscribed symbols on religious objects and palace walls. The Harappans, however, seem to have reserved their script almost exclusively for short, functional purposes. This leads us to the second, more radical possibility, that the script wasn't designed for literature or record-keeping at all. Some researchers argue it might have served a primarily ritual or symbolic function, like the Vinča symbols of Neolithic Europe, which may have conveyed meaning without constituting a full writing system. If true, the Harappan script could be a sophisticated code understood only by priests or merchants, never intended to tell stories or preserve laws. Then there's the darker hypothesis, deliberate destruction. Throughout history, conquerors and reformers have erased texts to suppress ideas. Could invading groups or internal shifts have led to the systematic annihilation of Harappan records? We know the civilization declined around 1900 BC, possibly due to environmental changes or migrations. If new powers sought to erase Harappan identity, destroying written works would be a potent tool. Alternatively, the Harappans themselves might have practiced ritual text destruction, like certain Vedic traditions where sacred knowledge was orally transmitted and never permanently recorded. The implications of this riddle stretch far beyond archaeology. If the Harappans did produce extensive writings now lost, we're missing a cornerstone of human history. But if they chose not to, if their civilization thrived without lengthy texts, it challenges our assumptions about what makes a society advanced. After all, the Inca built an empire without writing at all, using knotted strings called quipu for record keeping. Could the Harappans have relied on something equally unconventional, leaving us searching for the wrong kind of evidence until we uncover a hidden archive or crack the script's code? This absence will remain one of the most tantalizing silences in ancient history. The next puzzle in the Harappan script's mystery turns our attention to something so basic we take it for granted in modern writing. Which way do you read it? For over a century, scholars have debated whether these ancient symbols flowed left to right to left, or even switched directions with each line like an ox plowing a field, a style called baffling. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs or cuneiform, where surviving texts clearly show directional patterns, the Harappan script's brevity makes this deceptively simple question maddeningly hard to answer. Take the famous seal impression, small, square artifacts stamped with symbols likely used in trade. Many show cramped clusters of characters, with symbols sometimes overlapping or appearing oddly spaced. Some researchers argue the crowding on the right side of these seals suggests scribes started writing there and ran out of space, pointing to a right-to-left direction. But others counter that the apparent crowding could just be uneven stamping or wear over time. Then there's the pottery, where symbols occasionally appear in vertical columns, adding yet another potential layer of ambiguity. Without a single lengthy, unbroken inscription, it's like trying to determine the direction of a river from a handful of disconnected puddles. The baffling theory adds another tantalizing wrinkle. Ancient Greek and Hittite texts sometimes used this alternating direction method, turning at the end of each line like a typewriter carriage. Could the Harappans have done the same? Certain sequences on multi-line inscriptions show mirroring patterns that might support this, but again, the evidence is fragmentary. What complicates matters further is the script's potential multilingual use. If different language groups interacted in Harappan cities, could writing direction have varied by community, like Arabic's right-to-left flow contrasting with Latin's left-to-right? Perhaps the most fascinating clue comes from a handful of rare, longer inscriptions like the one found on a stone slab in D'Oliveira, spanning 17 symbols. Here, the spacing between groups of characters suggests deliberate breaks, almost like modern punctuation. If these breaks mark word divisions, they might hint at reading direction, but even then, interpretation split down the middle. It's a reminder that decipherment isn't just about cracking individual symbols. It's about reconstructing an entire system of thought, from the way a scribe's hand moved to the cultural rhythms that shaped their writing. Until we find a text long enough to reveal its own flow, the direction of the Harappan script will remain a riddle wrapped in an enigma, one where even the simplest questions defy straightforward answers. Among the hundreds of Harappan symbols, one small group stands out for its potential to crack open the civilization's mathematical mind: the suspected numerical signs. Unlike the rest of the script, these symbols appear repeatedly in clear, standardized patterns, often alongside trade goods or storage jars. But here's the catch: no one's entirely certain how this numerical system worked. Did it count in tens like most modern systems, or was it based on the number 8, a structure as alien to us as it was ingenious to them? Take the most frequently cited candidates for numerals: simple vertical lines, circles, and V-shaped marks. On storage seals, they often cluster in groups, like 3 lines followed by 2 circles or a V paired with 4 lines. At first glance, this seems straightforward. But compare these to the famously precise Harappan weight system, and contradictions emerge. The civilization's standardized weights follow a strict decimal progression, doubling from 1 to 2, then 4, 8, 16, and so on. If the script's numerals matched this, we'd expect base 10 symbols, yet some sequences, like repeating groups of 8 lines, hint at an octal or base 8 logic instead. The Mesopotamians, contemporaries of the Harappans, used a mix of base 10 and base 60, which survives in our modern minutes and hours. Could the Harappans have blended systems too? One theory suggests the script's numerals worked in base 8 for everyday counting, perhaps tied to the octal divisions seen in their brick dimensions or urban blocks, while weights adhered to base 10 for trade precision. It's not as far-fetched as it sounds. Ancient India later used base 8 in ritual contexts, while China's Shang dynasty combined decimal counting with duodecimal base 12 measurements. But skepticism lingers. Without a clear Rosetta Stone linking symbols to quantities, even the most convincing numerical theories remain speculative. Some researchers argue the repeating marks might not be numerals at all, but ownership tallies or ritual symbols. After all, the Indus Valley's famous unicorn seals often feature mysterious clusters of 7 marks, a sacred number in many cultures. Could these be religious notations instead of math? The debate intensifies when we examine outlier symbols. A handful of inscriptions feature unusual composite signs: a circle inside a square or a line crossed by 3 curves, that resist easy numerical classification. If these are higher value numerals, like hundreds or thousands, they could imply a system far more advanced than we've assumed. Or they might represent something entirely different: calendar notations, astronomical cycles, or even early fractions. What makes this riddle so critical is what it reveals about Harappan innovation. A unique numerical system would suggest a society that didn't just borrow ideas from Mesopotamia or Egypt, but crafted its own intellectual framework. And if that system blended bases using 8s for some purposes, 10s for others, it would reveal a flexibility of thought that rivals modern computing's mix of binary and decimal logic. Until we decode these symbols definitively, though, we're left with a tantalizing glimpse of mathematical sophistication, its full brilliance just out of reach. One symbol appears so often in Harappan inscriptions that it's become impossible to ignore: the unmistakable outline of a fish. This simple yet elegant glyph, found on seals, pottery, and even copper tablets, has sparked decades of fierce debate. Was it just a straightforward reference to fishing, a vital trade for a river valley civilization, or does it point to something far more profound, hidden in plain sight? Some researchers argue the fish symbol represents exactly what it depicts: a staple food source and economic pillar. After all, the Indus River teemed with fish, and archaeological evidence shows Harappan settlements relied heavily on aquatic resources. But here's where the plot thickens. The fish glyph doesn't just appear alongside trade records or storage tallies. It's also etched onto ceremonial objects and seals depicting ritual scenes, often positioned prominently near what might be deity figures. This duality, both mundane and sacred, hints at layers of meaning we're only beginning to unravel. Then there's the astrological theory. Centuries after the Harappan decline, Vedic texts associated fish with celestial bodies, particularly the constellation Pisces. Could this symbol have served as an early cosmological marker? The idea gains traction when you examine similar symbols in later Indian art, where fish frequently embody cosmic fertility or divine avatars like Vishnu's Matsya incarnation. If the Harappans pioneered this association, their fish glyph might be one of humanity's oldest surviving astrological signs, a bridge between ancient pragmatism and spiritual symbolism. But the most provocative theory comes from linguists who propose the fish didn't represent an actual creature at all. Instead, it might have functioned as a phonetic syllable, part of a rebuse-style writing system where images stand for sounds. In early scripts like Egyptian hieroglyphs, symbols often pulled double duty as both pictograms and sound carriers. For instance, a drawing of an owl could mean owl or the sound M in certain contexts. If the Harappan fish operated similarly, its meaning could shift entirely depending on its placement, perhaps sounding out a word like mina, which in later Sanskrit meant both fish and gem. This linguistic angle takes on new weight when you consider the Dravidian language family, still spoken in southern India. Proto-Dravidian roots include words like min, meaning fish, which share striking phonetic similarities with terms for stars and wealth. Could the fish symbol have embodied this interplay of sound and meaning, serving as a flexible linguistic building block? It's a tantalizing possibility, one that suggests the Harappan script wasn't just a tool for record-keeping, but a dynamic system capable of wordplay and layered metaphor. The fish's enduring legacy in South Asian iconography adds another dimension. From the Buddhist golden fish symbolizing prosperity to the Hindu Matsya avatar rescuing sacred knowledge from floods, aquatic imagery permeates the subcontinent's spiritual lexicon. If the Harappans seeded these associations, their simple fish glyph becomes a cultural keystone, a silent witness to ideas that would ripple across millennia. Yet for all these theories, certainty remains elusive. Without a bilingual inscription or a definitive Rosetta Stone moment, the fish symbol continues to swim just beyond our grasp, embodying the very essence of the Harappan script's mystery, familiar enough to tempt interpretation, but enigmatic enough to defy it. Whether it marked a fisherman's haul, mapped the stars, or whispered a forgotten syllable, its true significance lingers in the depths, waiting to surface. Of all the Harappan symbols, none captivates the imagination quite like the mysterious unicorn, not the mythical creature of European legends, but a stout, bovine-like figure with a single curved horn, stamped onto countless seals across the Indus Valley. This enigmatic motif appears on over half of all discovered Harappan seals, often positioned above a ritual stand and accompanied by clusters of script symbols. But what did it represent? A royal emblem, a sacred animal, or something even more unexpected? The unicorn's sheer prevalence suggests it held deep significance, possibly functioning as a kind of official insignia. In ancient Mesopotamia, cylinder seals bore images of gods or kings to authenticate documents. Could the Harappan unicorn have served a similar purpose, a stamp of authority for merchants or administrators? The uniformity of its design hints at centralized control, with artisans across the civilization replicating the same stylized creature with remarkable consistency. Yet, unlike Mesopotamian seals, which often glorified identifiable rulers, the unicorn stands alone, never accompanied by human figures or clear hieratic scenes. This absence of obvious royalty raises intriguing questions. Was Harappan power structured differently, with symbols rather than individuals embodying authority? Then there's the tantalizing trade angle. Many unicorn seals bear short inscriptions, often grouped in repetitive sequences that might denote merchant clans or commodity types. Imagine these seals pressed into clay tags tied to bales of cotton or jars of oil, their unicorns acting as a quality mark, a Bronze Age equivalent of a corporate logo. The repetition of certain symbol clusters alongside the unicorn, like the fish or the jar sign, could encode trade routes or guild affiliations, turning each seal into a portable identity card for commerce. But the plot thickens when we consider the unicorn's possible mythological roots. The horned figure frequently appears alongside a ritual stand, suggesting religious connotations. Later Indian iconography abounds with horned deities and sacred bulls, from Shiva's Nandi to the yogic bull imagery of the Vedas. Could the Harappan unicorn be an early prototype of these enduring symbols? Some scholars propose it represents a proto-Shiva figure, blending animal and divine attributes, a theory bolstered by the famed Pashupati seal, which depicts a horned figure in a meditative pose surrounded by animals. The most radical theory, though, challenges whether the unicorn was ever meant to depict a real animal at all. The single horn might be a ceremonial headdress or a symbolic appendage, much like the dual horns of Mesopotamian gods represented their divinity. Alternatively, the creature could be a composite, a visual metaphor blending traits of bulls, antelopes, and mythical beings to convey abstract concepts like fertility or sovereignty. What makes this riddle so compelling is how it intertwines with the script's unsolved mysteries. The unicorn seals almost always include short inscriptions, yet we can't yet decipher whether these texts label the seal's owner, invoke a deity, or serve some entirely different function. Until we crack the script, the unicorn's true meaning will remain just out of reach, a silent ambassador from a civilization that mastered the art of symbolism but left no key to its code. Whether a trade marker, a divine emblem, or something beyond our current understanding, this enigmatic creature stands as a testament to the Harappan's ability to communicate volumes through imagery alone, even as their words stay stubbornly silent. One of the greatest unresolved puzzles of the Harappan civilization isn't just how their script worked, it's why it vanished so abruptly around 1900 BCE, fading into obscurity as the cities themselves crumbled. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs or Mesopotamian cuneiform, which evolved and influenced later writing systems, the Harappan script seemingly disappeared without a trace. What could have caused such a complete linguistic erasure? The answer may lie at the intersection of environmental catastrophe, cultural upheaval, and the fragile nature of literacy itself. Consider the climate first. Sediment cores from the Arabian Sea reveal a dramatic shift in monsoon patterns around this time. Centuries of reliable rains gave way to prolonged droughts, turning fertile floodplains into dust bowls. The Gagga-Hakra River, once the lifeblood of Harappan settlements, dwindled to a seasonal trickle. As agriculture collapsed, urban centers emptied, their populations scattering into smaller, isolated villages. In such chaos, the elaborate bureaucracy that likely required written records would have dissolved, taking the script's practical purpose with it. When survival becomes a daily struggle, who has time to teach scribes or carve seals? Literacy, after all, is a luxury of stability, but climate alone doesn't explain everything. Enter the contentious Aryan migration theory. Linguistic and genetic evidence suggests Indo-European speaking groups migrated into South Asia around this period, possibly bringing their own oral traditions. If these newcomers prioritized spoken Sanskrit over Harappan writing, the script could have been marginalized within generations. Some scholars point to parallels with the fall of Linear B in ancient Greece. another sophisticated script lost when Mycenaean palaces fell and Greek oral culture reasserted dominance. Yet this theory remains hotly debated. Did migration trigger conflict, or did the Harappan's decline create a power vacuum that newcomers filled? Without clear evidence of invasion or sudden cultural replacement, the narrative stays murky. Perhaps the most haunting possibility is that the script didn't vanish abruptly but faded through slow neglect. Imagine a scenario where only a small elite priests, merchants, or administrators ever knew the symbols. As trade networks fractured and cities depopulated, this literate class might have dwindled until one day no one remembered how to read the old seals. It's a phenomenon seen in later history. The Mayan script, once vibrant, fell silent after the Spanish conquest, not through destruction but through the dispersal of its keepers. Could the Harappan script have met a similar fate, its last scribes taking its secrets to unmarked graves? The deeper we dig into this riddle, the more it challenges our assumptions about cultural continuity. Most ancient scripts evolved or were adapted by successors. Egyptian hieroglyphs influenced Coptic, cuneiform gave way to Aramaic. The Harappan script's total disappearance suggests something far rarer, a complete rupture in the chain of knowledge. Whether by environmental collapse, cultural displacement, or simply the slow erosion of necessity, its loss stands as a stark reminder of how fragile written language can be even in civilizations that once seemed unshakable. While ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia loudly proclaimed the exploits of their rulers, pharaohs immortalized on temple walls, kings boasting of conquests in cuneiform tablets, the Harappan civilization remains eerily silent. Not a single inscription celebrates a mighty ruler, not one seal declares a royal lineage. This absence isn't just puzzling, it's revolutionary. In a world where every other Bronze Age power built its identity around the cult of kingship, why does the Indus Valley show no trace of this obsession? The contrast couldn't be starker. In Mesopotamia, the Sumerian king list meticulously records dynasties stretching back to mythical times. Egypt's Palo stone chronicles pharaohs' reigns down to the yearly Nile floods. Even the Minoans of Crete, contemporaries of the Harappans, left behind frescoes of priest kings. Yet in Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, archaeologists have unearthed no palaces, no grand tombs, no victory stelae. Just meticulously planned cities with no obvious central seat of power. This isn't a case of evidence lost to time. It's a deliberate architectural and cultural choice that challenges our deepest assumptions about early states. One provocative theory suggests the Harappans pioneered a form of collective governance, perhaps ruled by merchant guilds or councils of elders. Imagine a Bronze Age Venice where trade oligarchs rather than despots held sway. The uniformity of bricks, weights, and urban layouts across distant cities hints at strong coordination but not necessarily top-down rule. Even the famed Great Bath of Mohenjo-Daro, often labeled a royal ritual site, shows no inscriptions linking it to any individual. Could authority have been distributed with decisions made through consensus rather than decree? Then there's the buried alternative, that royal inscriptions do exist but we're looking in the wrong places. Most Harappan excavations have focused on civic and commercial areas. What if their equivalent of royal archives lay in undiscovered citadels or riverine deposits yet to be unearthed? The recent discovery of a potential ceremonial platform at D'Oliveira, adorned with 10 large inscriptions, suggests we may still have monumental finds ahead. Or consider the intriguing priest-king statue, a lone, bearded figure with ornate cloak fragments. Found in a modest excavation, it's tantalizing evidence that individual leaders may have existed, even if they didn't broadcast their power like Ramses or Hammurabi. The mystery deepens when we examine later South Asian traditions. Vedic texts describe early republics like the Lichavis, where rulers were elected. Jain and Buddhist sources speak of merchant-led city-states. Could these reflect echoes of Harappan political values, preserved orally long after their script vanished? It's a radical thought that the Indus Valley might have nurtured a forgotten experiment in collective rule, one that left no room for the boastful inscriptions of kings. Yet the absence of royal proclamations might hold another, simpler explanation. Perhaps the Harappans did have kings, but their concept of sovereignty was fundamentally different. In societies where rulers were seen as divine intermediaries, like Egypt, monumental writing served a sacred purpose. If Harappan elites viewed power as purely administrative, more about managing granaries than communing with gods, their governance might not have required stone-carved propaganda. The truth may lie somewhere between these extremes, a society that balanced strong central planning with cultural modesty, where authority was present but not ostentatious. Until new discoveries tilt the scales, this riddle forces us to reconsider what power looked like in the ancient world. The Harappans built cities that rivaled Egypt's, traded across oceans, and standardized weights with scientific precision, all without leaving us a single royal name. In their silence, they speak volumes about the diversity of human political imagination. When we trace the Harappan Script's footprint across the ancient world, a curious pattern emerges. It clings tightly to the Indus Valley, rarely venturing beyond its heartland. Unlike Mesopotamian cuneiform or Egyptian hieroglyphs, which sprawled across empires and trade routes, these symbols seem to have been deliberately contained. Even in bustling port cities like Lothal, where Harappan merchants traded with distant Mesopotamia, the script appears on local seals but never on goods bound for foreign shores. This self-imposed geographic limit raises a provocative question. Was this writing system not just a tool for communication, but a carefully guarded instrument of control? Take Mesopotamia, the Harappans' most frequent trade partner. Excavations at Ur and other Sumerian cities have uncovered Harappan-style beads, pottery, and even etched carnelian proof of vibrant exchange. Yet not a single Harappan inscription has surfaced there. At first glance, this seems baffling. The Sumerians kept meticulous records of foreign commerce, even noting traders from Meluhha, widely believed to be the Indus region. If Harappan merchants were active in Mesopotamian markets, why wouldn't they use their script for contracts or inventories? One compelling theory suggests the script functioned as an internal administrative cipher, a Bronze Age trade secret. Imagine a Harappan merchant presenting a sealed clay tablet to a Sumerian official. The symbols would be meaningless to outsiders, yet instantly recognizable to another Indus trader, acting as a cryptographic guarantee of authenticity. This wouldn't be without precedent. Centuries later, the Phoenicians spread their alphabet widely, but the Minoans of Crete used linear exclusively for local administration, keeping their records opaque to outsiders. The script's confinement becomes even more striking when we examine regional variations. At the eastern edge of the Harappan world, sites like Alamgapur show simplified versions of the script, as if literacy diluted with distance from Mohenjo-Daro. Some symbols disappear entirely, while others gain new decorative flourishes. This gradient suggests the writing system wasn't uniformly taught or enforced. It evolved differently in far-flung outposts, perhaps adapted by local elites who only partially understood it. But here's the twist. The script's geographic limits might not reflect weakness but strategic brilliance. By keeping their writing system localized, the Harappans could have maintained a monopoly on certain bureaucratic processes. Think of it like a modern corporation using proprietary software. Outsiders can trade with you, but they can't replicate your systems. This would explain why Indus Valley standardization, like those famous uniform weights, persisted for centuries. The script wasn't just recording trade, it was actively regulating it. The absence of the script in Mesopotamia might also hint at deeper cultural choices. Unlike the Sumerians, who etched their myths and laws onto temple walls for all to see, the Harappans seem to have prioritized discretion. Their most intricate inscriptions appear on small, portable seals, objects designed for intimate verification, not public display. This contrast in information politics reveals a civilization less interested in broadcasting its achievements than in maintaining tightly controlled networks of trust. Yet the mystery lingers. If the script was purely administrative, why invest in hundreds of unique symbols? And why did it vanish so completely when other Bronze Age writing systems adapted or transformed? The geographic riddle ultimately mirrors the larger Harappan enigma, a civilization advanced enough to engineer perfect brick ratios and continent-spanning trade, but deliberately opaque about the mechanisms that held it all together. Their script's stubborn refusal to travel might be the ultimate clue, not to their isolation, but to their mastery of controlled connectivity. Scattered across thousands of broken pottery shards in Harappan ruins, a peculiar pattern emerges: clusters of symbols etched into the clay before firing, sometimes repeating, sometimes standing alone. At first glance, they resemble the formal script found on seals, but with subtle differences: looser strokes, occasional extra flourishes, even symbols not seen elsewhere. These enigmatic pottery marks pose a riddle that cuts to the heart of the script's purpose. Were they early attempts at writing, practical workshop notations, or something far more mystical? Consider the practical angle first. In ancient Mesopotamia, potters often marked their wares with simple signs, crosses, circles, or wavy lines, to denote workshop ownership or batch numbers. Could Harappan potters have done the same? Some recurring symbols, like a single stroke or a basic loop, appear on pots from multiple sites, hinting at a decentralized system of identification. But here's where things get interesting. Unlike Mesopotamian marks, which tend to be isolated and crude, many Harappan pottery symbols overlap with the formal script's repertoire. A fish glyph on a seal might appear nearly identical to one scratched onto a jar, just less meticulously rendered. This blurring of lines suggests the script wasn't just for elites. It might have trickled down to artisans in simplified forms. Yet the ritual theory complicates matters. Excavations at sites like Kalibangan reveal pottery marks concentrated near fire altars and ceremonial platforms. Some vessels bear sequences of symbols that mirror those on seals, linked to religious context, like the recurring jar and plant signs. If these weren't workshop tags but votive inscriptions, their purpose shifts entirely. Imagine a potter etching a sacred symbol onto a vessel destined for temple offerings, encoding a silent prayer into the clay. Later Indian traditions, like the Hindu practice of inscribing mantras onto ritual objects, offer tantalizing parallels. Maybe these marks weren't proto-writing at all, but a kind of symbolic bridge between the physical and spiritual worlds. The most radical interpretation challenges our very definition of writing. Some sequences on pottery show symbols combined in ways never seen on seals, stacked vertically or nested inside one another. Could these represent an experimental phase of the script where rules were still fluid? Alternatively, they might reflect regional dialects in symbol use, like variations in cursive handwriting. At the site of Roman Derry, far from the Indus heartland, pottery marks include unique swirls and zigzags absent elsewhere. If the script was still evolving when the civilization declined, these variations could be frozen snapshots of that process, a writing system caught midway between invention and standardization. What makes this puzzle so vital is what it reveals about literacy's spread. If even potters used elements of the script, however crudely, it hints at a society where written communication permeated multiple social layers. Yet the absence of lengthy texts, even on pottery, leaves the question hanging. Were these marks the equivalent of modern exit signs, universally recognized but not part of formal writing? Or were they part of a larger, lost system where context determined meaning? Until we find a kiln site ledger or a potter's instruction manual, these ghostly traces on fired clay will remain whispers of a conversation we're only beginning to overhear. Among the most striking symbols in Harappan artifacts are the recurring animal motifs: sturdy bulls, majestic elephants, and even the occasional rhinoceros etched with astonishing detail alongside the script's more abstract signs. These creatures aren't mere decorations, they pulse with purpose, appearing on seals, tablets, and pottery with a consistency that demands interpretation. Were they sacred totems, markers of social identity, or even clever visual puns in a sophisticated rebuse system? The answer could reshape our understanding of how the Harappans saw their world and communicated within it. Take the bull, one of the most frequent animal depictions. Unlike the stylized unicorn, these bulls are rendered with naturalistic precision. Muscular shoulders, curved horns, sometimes even a hump like the zebu cattle still revered in South Asia today. On seals, they often stand before ritual objects as if part of a ceremony. Later Vedic texts describe bulls as symbols of power and fertility, linked to deities like Indra. Could the Harappans have shared this symbolism, using the bull as a divine emblem? Or consider the practical angle. Bulls were the tractors of the ancient world, vital for plowing fields and hauling goods. Their prominence might reflect an agrarian society's values, much like modern nations put wheat sheaves or oak leaves on their coins. Then there's the elephant, another recurring motif, an animal notably absent from Mesopotamian or Egyptian art, but central to South Asian iconography for millennia. Harappan seals depict elephants with ropes or cloth draped over their backs, hinting at domestication. Fast forward 2,000 years, and elephants become royal symbols in Mauryan art and later Hindu-Buddhist traditions. This continuity raises a tantalizing possibility that the Harappans seeded cultural associations that endured long after their script faded. But here's the twist. Unlike bull imagery, which appears across the civilization, elephant motifs cluster in specific regions like Gujarat. Could these be clan markers, signaling the identity of certain merchant groups or ruling lineages? The most radical theory, though, treats these animals not as literal representations, but as syllables in a rebuse puzzle, where pictures represent sounds rather than objects. Imagine a seal showing a fish followed by an elephant. If the Harappan word for fish was min and elephant was pilu, the sequence might encode the sound min pilu, perhaps a personal name or place. This technique appears in early Egyptian hieroglyphs and ancient Chinese scripts, where visual puns bridged image and language. For the Harappans, whose script's brevity resists traditional decipherment, a rebuse system could explain how so much meaning was packed into so few symbols. Yet the animal motifs might hold even deeper layers. Some seals feature hybrid creatures with bull bodies and antelope heads, or mythical beasts with multiple tails. These could represent deities akin to the part-animal gods of Mesopotamia or Egypt. Alternatively, they might symbolize constellations, mapping the night sky onto portable seals. The rhinoceros, another rare but striking motif, appears only in regions where the animal thrived, suggesting localized cultural nods. What emerges is a symbolic language as nuanced as the script itself, one where animals weren't just depicted but deployed. Whether as sacred icons, social badges, or linguistic building blocks, these creatures were far more than art. They were a silent dialogue between the Harappans and their world, a dialogue we're only beginning to overhear. Until we crack their code, their full meaning remains as elusive as the script that accompanies them, a menagerie of mysteries waiting to be untangled. What if we've been searching for meaning in all the wrong places? For decades, scholars assumed the Harappan script encoded a spoken language, but a daring minority of researchers proposed something far more radical. What if these symbols weren't words at all, but a sophisticated system of non-linguistic signs, closer to medieval heraldry or modern corporate logos than to true writing? This provocative theory, championed by Steve Farmer and Richard Sproat, turns traditional decipherment efforts on their head. Farmer and Sproat's argument hinges on several puzzling features of the script. Unlike ancient languages with clear phonetic patterns, Harappan symbols show little repetition of sign sequences. a telltale marker of grammatical structure. The average inscription contains just 5 symbols, far too brief for syntactic complexity. Even more telling, the absence of longer texts. Every other Bronze Age script, from cuneiform to hieroglyphs, left behind extended narratives, legal codes, or administrative records. The Harappans, despite their urban sophistication, seemingly didn't. Could this be because their symbols conveyed meaning without recording speech? The Vinča parallels lend weight to this idea. Found in Neolithic Europe centuries before the Harappan civilization, Vinča signs resemble a script but lack the systematic grammar of true writing. Most archaeologists interpret them as ritual or ownership marks, a pre-literate symbolic code. If Harappan symbols functioned similarly, they might have encoded clan identities, trade affiliations, or religious concepts without ever translating to spoken sentences. Picture modern traffic signs. A red octagon universally means stop, but it doesn't represent a word in any language, but critics counter with the script's sheer complexity. With over 400 distinct symbols, it dwarfs known non-linguistic systems like Vinča, which has only about 60 signs. This scale edges uncomfortably close to full writing, yet still falls short of scripts like Sumerian cuneiform, which used around 600 signs to represent both words and syllables. The Harappan system might occupy a murky middle ground, not quite language but far more nuanced than simple pictograms. Some sequences even show directional patterning, suggesting syntactic rules invisible in shorter inscriptions. The ritual angle offers a compelling compromise. Certain symbols like the recurring jar or plant signs cluster around ceremonial objects, hinting at esoteric meanings known only to initiates. Later Indian traditions, from Hindu yantras to Buddhist mandalas, used geometric symbols to encode spiritual concepts beyond literal language. Could the Harappan script be an early example of this mystical symbolism? Farmer points to medieval European heraldry, where coats of arms communicated family lineage and status through visual codes rather than text. Yet the most tantalizing evidence comes from the seals themselves. Many feature animals alongside script symbols, not random doodles but precise combinations. A bull might always appear with the same 2 signs, suggesting a standardized emblem. This aligns with how non-linguistic systems work. Think of a modern brand logo, where the Apple silhouette or Nike swoosh conveys identity without phonetic value. If Harappan seals functioned as Bronze Age trademarks, their script might be a proprietary code for authenticating goods or lineages. The implications ripple beyond archaeology. If correct, this theory rewrites our understanding of early information systems. The Harappans wouldn't be a civilization that failed to develop full writing, but pioneers of an entirely different communication model, one where symbols bypassed language altogether. Yet until we find a key artifact, perhaps a seal with both Harappan symbols and a known script, the debate remains unresolved. What's certain is this: whether language or emblem, the Harappan script challenges our deepest assumptions about how humans encode meaning. And that makes it one of history's most fascinating intellectual puzzles. Of all the Harappan inscriptions discovered, none stands out quite like the massive 10-symbol signboard found at Dhalavira, a sprawling settlement in modern-day Gujarat. Unlike the small seals and pottery marks scattered across other sites, this inscription was carved in bold, oversized characters on a limestone slab, mounted prominently near the city's northern gateway. It's the closest thing the Harappan world has to a public billboard, and its purpose remains one of the script's most tantalizing puzzles. Was this a royal decree, a religious proclamation, or perhaps even an ancient street sign directing travelers through the city's labyrinthine streets? The sheer scale of the signboard suggests it was meant to be seen and understood by many. Each symbol is nearly 15 centimeters tall, dwarfing the tiny glyphs on trade seals. Their crisp, deeply incised lines imply careful craftsmanship, as if the message carried weighty significance. Positioned near what archaeologists believe was a ceremonial gateway, the slab would have greeted visitors entering the city's fortified citadel. This strategic placement hints at an official function, possibly declaring the authority of local rulers or the sacredness of the space beyond. Compare this to Mesopotamian cities, where similar monumental inscriptions often heralded the achievements of kings or the favor of gods. Yet without a single royal title or deity name deciphered in the Harappan script, the Dollavera signboard's message stays frustratingly out of reach. What makes this inscription even more intriguing is its uniqueness. No other Harappan site has yielded anything comparable, no towering stone proclamations, no lengthy civic markers. This singularity raises provocative questions. Was Dollavera a special administrative or religious hub, granted the privilege of public writing, or does its survival simply reflect an accident of preservation, with similar signboards elsewhere lost to time? The symbols themselves offer subtle clues. Certain glyphs, like the recurring jar and fish signs, appear across other Harappan texts, but their arrangement here is distinct. One theory suggests the sequence encodes a place name, perhaps Dollavera itself in an ancient form carved to mark the city's identity, much like modern welcome signs at municipal boundaries. Then there's the ritual angle. The signboard's proximity to large water reservoirs and possible fire altars fuels speculation it might have announced temple rules or festival dates. Later Indian traditions, like the Ashokan edicts carved on pillars across the subcontinent, blended civic and sacred messaging. Could the Dollavera slab be an early prototype of this practice? The repetition of one symbol, a looping curve resembling a sickle, has led some researchers to propose it represented a lunar deity or harvest cycle, turning the signboard into a communal calendar. But perhaps the most revolutionary interpretation challenges our assumptions about Harappan society altogether. What if the signboard wasn't meant to be read in the conventional sense, but functioned as a symbolic monument, a Bronze Age equivalent of modern corporate or university crests, where layered emblems convey prestige rather than literal text? The carefully spaced symbols, their rhythmic repetition, even the polished stone itself might have communicated status through visual splendor rather than linguistic meaning. After all, medieval heraldry and modern logos often transmit identity without phonetic translation. The Dollavera signboard's true significance may lie somewhere between these theories, a fusion of practicality and symbolism designed to awe as much as to inform. Its isolation in the archaeological record makes it all the more enigmatic, a single beam of light shining through the fog of 4,000 years, illuminating just enough to remind us how much we've yet to uncover. Whether a king's boast, a sacred invocation, or the Harappan version of a city limit sign, its silent symbols stand as a testament to a civilization that mastered the art of public communication, even as the words themselves remain just beyond our grasp. One of the most perplexing gaps in the history of writing lies between the enigmatic Harappan script and the later Brahmi script that swept across ancient India nearly 2,000 years later. Unlike the clear evolutionary paths we see elsewhere, like cuneiform developing into Old Persian, or Egyptian hieroglyphs influencing early alphabets, the Harappan symbols leave no visible fingerprints on the subcontinent's later writing systems. This abrupt discontinuity raises a haunting question. How could an entire writing tradition vanish without ceding its successors? Consider the striking contrast with the Aegean world. On Crete, the mysterious Linear, a script used by the Minoans, eventually gave way to Linear B, adapted by the Mycenaean Greeks to write their own language. Though the languages differed, the script shared core symbols and administrative functions. Archaeologists can trace the transformation, watching signs morph and merge across clay tablets. But in South Asia, no such bridge exists between the Harappan script and Brahmi, which appears suddenly in the 3rd century BC like a linguistic Big Bang. The two systems share no obvious symbols, no structural parallels, just a yawning chronological chasm. Some scholars argue this rupture reflects a catastrophic collapse of Harappan urbanism. When cities like Mohenjo-Daro emptied and trade networks unraveled, the script may have lost its practical purpose, surviving only in scattered, dwindling enclaves until even memory of it faded. Oral traditions could have preserved fragments. Later Indian texts speak of lost writings of the ancients, but without institutional support, the script had no mechanism to adapt or evolve. Literacy, after all, thrives in stable ecosystems. Scribble schools, bureaucratic demand, cultural continuity. Strip those away, and even the most sophisticated writing can flicker out. Yet the Minoan parallel invites a darker possibility. Linear B survived because the Mycenaeans conquered Crete and repurposed its administrative tools for their own needs. Had the Harappans faced a similar conquest by a literate culture, their script might have been absorbed or hybridized. Instead, the Indo-Aryan migrations, if they occurred as theorized, brought oral Vedic traditions, not competing writing systems. Without a rival script to clash or merge with, Harappan symbols had no pressure to adapt, leaving them frozen in time until oblivion. The Brahmi script's sudden emergence adds another layer of intrigue. Some researchers detect faint Harappan echoes in certain Brahmi numerals or symbol shapes like the Brahmi, Ga, resembling a simplified Harappan fish. Could these be dim cultural memories preserved through rituals or art? Alternatively, Brahmi might have drawn from Semitic scripts like Aramaic, introduced through Persian trade. If so, the Harappan script didn't so much evolve as get replaced by an entirely foreign innovation, like a river abruptly changing course. The deeper we dig, the more this riddle challenges our assumptions about cultural transmission. Most ancient scripts didn't die cleanly. They bled into successors, leaving traces like genetic code. The Harappan script's clean disappearance suggests something rarer, a total systems failure where the very idea of writing had to be reinvented millennia later. Whether through isolation, cataclysm, or sheer inertia, it stands as a stark reminder that even humanity's greatest inventions can vanish when the threads of continuity snap. Turn over a Harappan seal in your hands, and you'll notice something peculiar. These small, square artifacts aren't just inscribed with cryptic symbols. They're perforated, as if designed to be worn or hung. This tiny detail opens a monumental debate. Were these objects practical trade licenses, sacred amulets, or something in between? The answer could rewrite how we understand the intersection of commerce and spirituality in one of the ancient world's most enigmatic civilizations. On one side of the argument are the pragmatists who point to the seal's prevalence in market areas and storage facilities. Many bear short inscriptions paired with animal motifs, often the unicorn or bull, and show signs of repetitive stamping on clay tags. It's easy to picture them pressed into soft clay sealing rope knots around bales of cotton or jars of oil, acting as Bronze Age barcodes. The uniformity of certain symbol clusters suggests standardized meanings, perhaps merchant ID or commodity codes. At Lothal, a coastal trade hub, seals cluster near dockside warehouses, reinforcing their role in a bustling import-export economy. If this theory holds, the script might encode transactional data, quantities, origins, or even contracts. But the spiritual camp counters with equally compelling evidence. Many seals display ritual scenes, figures kneeling before horned deities, or animals flanking altar-like stands. Their perforations hint at wearability, like talismans strung around necks. Later Indian traditions, from Hindu yantras to Buddhist Dhammakron, are a letter 1E47 Imakron tablets, used inscribed objects for protection or devotion. Could Harappan seals be early prototypes of this practice? The recurring unicorn motif, absent from nature but ubiquitous on seals, might represent a mythological guardian rather than a trade logo. Even the material fired steatite, durable yet finely carved, suggests objects meant to endure, perhaps as heirlooms passed through generations. A third, hybrid theory, bridges these extremes. In ancient Mesopotamia, cylinder seals doubled as administrative tools and expressions of personal piety, bearing both royal insignias and prayers. Harappan seals might have served similarly, simultaneously authenticating goods and invoking divine favor. The script's brevity could support this. A handful of symbols might name a merchant while also encoding a blessing, like "May the bull god protect this shipment." The ink spot where these theories collide is the script itself. If the symbols recorded tax quotas or trader names, their purpose skews bureaucratic. But if they named deities or recited charms, their essence was sacred. Without decipherment, we're left weighing context. Seals found in granaries tilt functional, those in ritual spaces spiritual. Perhaps the truth lies in a dimension we've yet to consider, that for the Harappans, commerce and cosmology weren't opposing forces but threads of the same fabric. A trader's seal didn't just secure goods, it wove them into a cosmic order where every transaction, no matter how mundane, resonated with deeper meaning. Until we crack the code, these perforated stones remain suspended between worlds, as enigmatic as the script they carry. Whether receipts or relics, their true function whispers to us from the edges of understanding, a riddle wrapped in clay and time. Imagine watching a Harappan scribe at work 4,000 years ago, their hand moving deliberately across wet clay, each stroke of the stylus capturing a symbol in precise, practiced motions. While we can't travel back in time, cutting-edge 3D imaging technology is now letting us reconstruct those very movements by analyzing the grooves and ridges left behind in seal impressions. The angle of a tool's entry, the depth of a line's tailing edge, even the slight wobble of a curve, these microscopic clues reveal not just what was written but how. And this forensic approach to ancient handwriting might hold the key to unlocking one of the script's most subtle riddles. Did stroke order vary across regions, hinting at distinct scribble traditions or even decentralized centers of power? Take the ubiquitous fish symbol found on seals from Mohenjo-Daro to Lothal. At first glance, every iteration looks identical, a simple, arched body with a triangular tail. But 3D scans expose telling differences. On seals from the Western sites, the stroke often begins at the head, sweeping downward in one fluid motion. Meanwhile, Eastern examples frequently start at the tail, building the symbol in two separate strokes. These aren't random variations, they're the fingerprints of learned techniques, passed down through generations of scribes. Modern calligraphers will recognize this phenomenon immediately. Just as Chinese characters follow strict stroke orders that vary by region, Harappan symbols might encode geographic or cultural identities in their very construction. The implications ripple outward. If stroke patterns cluster by location, it could mean the Harappan world hosted multiple scribble schools, each with its own stylistic conventions. Picture apprentice scribes in distant cities learning to draw the unicorn, symboled differently not because the meaning changed, but because local tradition dictated technique. This would challenge the long-held assumption of a rigidly centralized script, suggesting instead a flexible system adapted to regional needs. Even more intriguing, some seals show hybrid style symbols combining Western and Eastern stroke orders. Were these the work of traveling scribes or evidence of cultural exchange at bustling trade hubs? But the mystery deepens when we examine outlier cases. A handful of seals, mostly from the coastal city of Dolivera, display symbols with such erratic stroke directions they defy categorization. Lines crisscross haphazardly, curves double back on themselves, the opposite of the precision seen elsewhere. One theory suggests these might be the work of semi-literate artisans copying symbols without formal training. Alternatively, they could represent a deliberate cryptographic twist, a way to mark official seals from counterfeit ones. After all, if everyone expects the jar symbol to be drawn clockwise, crafting it counterclockwise becomes a covert authentication method. What makes this detective work so revolutionary is how it bypasses the need for full decipherment. Even without knowing what the symbols say, their physical creation tells a story, one of regional identities, knowledge transmission, and perhaps even hidden layers of bureaucracy. The strokes themselves become artifacts as eloquent as the symbols they form, and as imaging technology improves, we might soon trace these variations down to the individual scribe putting names, or at least distinct hands, to the anonymous writers of the Indus Valley. Until then, every scanned seal offers a silent lesson in the artistry and complexity of a script that refused to be standardized, even as it united a civilization. Among the hundreds of Harappan symbols, a select few bear an uncanny resemblance to motifs that would appear thousands of years later in Freemasonry: the all-seeing eye, the square and compass, even celestial symbols like suns and moons framed by geometric patterns. At first glance, these parallels seem too precise to dismiss as mere coincidence. Could there be a thread connecting Bronze Age Indus Valley artisans to medieval stonemasons? Or are we seeing patterns where none exist, victims of what archaeologists call symbolic pareidolia, the human tendency to impose familiar shapes on ancient designs? The most striking example is the so-called horned altar symbol found on multiple Harappan seals, a triangular or trapezoidal figure flanked by curved protrusions resembling bull horns. Place this alongside the Masonic square and compass emblem, and the visual echo is unsettling. Both symbols employ stark geometric forms with precise angles, both often appear alongside celestial imagery, and both occupy central positions in their respective iconographic systems. Even more intriguing, some Harappan seals depict this symbol with a single eye motif at its apex, mirroring the Masonic eye of providence. The temptation to draw a direct lineage is strong, but here's where skepticism must intervene. Cultural diffusion, the spread of ideas across time and space, offers one possible explanation. The Indus Valley traded extensively with Mesopotamia, where similar geometric symbols appeared in temple architecture. Centuries later, these motifs could have traveled westward through Persian and Byzantine craftsmen, eventually influencing medieval European guilds. It's a plausible chain, but one riddled with gaps. No continuous artistic tradition bridges the 4,000-year gulf between Harappan seals and early Masonic lodges. And while trade routes carried goods, there's no evidence they transmitted esoteric symbolism across millennia. The pseudo-archaeology camp takes this further, proposing secret preservation of Harappan wisdom by initiated groups, a tantalizing but problematic narrative. Such claims often rely on cherry-picked visual matches while ignoring contextual differences. The Harappan horned altar, for instance, consistently appears alongside zebu bulls and ritual stands, suggesting a specific local meaning lost to time. Masonic symbols, by contrast, evolved from medieval Christian and Kabbalistic traditions. Forcing a connection risks stripping both systems of their genuine historical richness. A more grounded approach examines universal symbolic tendencies. Geometry, circles, triangles, intersecting lines, is a linguistic constant in human expression, recurring independently across cultures. Pyramids emerged in Egypt and Mesoamerica without contact. Labyrinth designs appear in Neolithic Europe and ancient India. The Harappans and later Masons might simply have arrived at similar visual solutions to represent cosmic order, divine surveillance, or architectural precision. After all, the square and compass weren't invented by Freemasons but inherited from earlier craftsmen's tools, just as Harappan symbols likely reflected their own material world. What makes this riddle so compelling is how it mirrors broader debates in archaeology. When do similarities signify connection, and when do they reveal the shared architecture of human imagination? The Harappan Masonic parallel becomes a test case for how we interpret ancient symbols, whether we project our own frameworks onto the past or allow it to speak in its own, often unfamiliar terms. Until we decipher the script's true meaning, these geometric echoes remain an open question, a reminder that some patterns transcend time, even if their meanings don't. Hidden beneath the stylized curves and geometric precision of Harappan symbols, some researchers believe they've found traces of an ancient celestial language, a code tracking solstices, lunar cycles, and planetary movements. This theory, most famously championed by historian N.K. Rao in the 1960s, proposes that certain glyphs didn't just represent objects or sounds, but acted as astronomical markers akin to the sophisticated calendar glyphs of the Maya. But does the evidence hold up to scrutiny, or are we projecting modern fascinations onto 4,000-year-old scratches? Rao's hypothesis centers on recurring symbol clusters that appear to align with solstice events when mapped onto known Harappan urban layouts. At the site of Kalibangan, for example, a sequence of 3 symbols often interpreted as jar, arrow, and sun repeats on seals found near what might have been an observatory platform. Rao argued these symbols corresponded to solar positions during the summer solstice, their arrangement mirroring the sun's path across specific architectural sightlines. Other researchers have pointed to the loop and star motif, suggesting it encodes 18-year lunar nodal cycles critical for predicting eclipses. If true, the Harappans would predate the Babylonians in systematic celestial observation by centuries. The statistical backbone of Rao's work lies in symbol frequencies. He noted that certain signs peaked in archaeological layers corresponding to climactic shifts, like the weakening monsoon around 2200 BC. One glyph resembling a wavy line spiked during drought periods, possibly representing rain pleas or river levels. Another, a circle with radiating lines clustered in layers with fire altar remains, hinting at solstice rituals. These patterns, Rao claimed, weren't random. They reflected a script deeply intertwined with environmental and astronomical rhythms. Yet critics highlight glaring flaws in this approach. Unlike Maya glyphs, which explicitly depict celestial events, serpents swallowing sun disks, Venus symbols beside dates, Harappan symbols lack direct iconographic ties to astronomy. The sun sign Rao identified could just as easily be a wheel, a shield, or an abstract clan emblem. Even more damning, his statistical correlations often relied on selective samples. A symbol appearing 50 times across 5 centuries might cluster twice near solstice-aligned structures, a coincidence inevitable in any large dataset. Modern studies using machine learning find no stronger astronomical patterning in Harappan symbols than in randomized scripts. The Maya comparison reveals another weak spot. Maya scribes left behind codices filled with explicit calendar tables, allowing linguists to confirm astronomical meanings. The Harappans left no such manuals. Without a deciphered text to anchor symbols to celestial events, any alignment remains speculative. A star symbol might mark a deity, a commodity, or a syllable, with no way to confirm its role in tracking the heavens. Where Rao's theory gains traction is in Harappan engineering. Their cities did exhibit sophisticated water management tied to seasonal floods, and certain structures, like Dolivera's stadium-like enclosure, aligned to cardinal directions with eerie precision. If they could engineer perfect brick ratios and city grids, why not encode celestial knowledge? The answer might lie in middle ground. Rather than a full-fledged astronomical script, certain symbols may have pulled double duty, denoting monsoons for farmers while serving as ritual shorthand for priests. A single rain glyph could thus be practical and sacred, its meaning fluid across contexts. Ultimately, the astronomical riddle reflects a broader challenge in Harappan studies: the line between disciplined interpretation and overactive imagination. While Rao's work opened doors to interdisciplinary approaches, it also serves as a cautionary tale. a reminder that in a script this enigmatic, even the most elegant theories must contend with the silence of 4,000 years. Until a bilingual inscription emerges, perhaps a clay tablet pairing Harappan symbols with Mesopotamian star lists, these celestial connections will remain tantalizing possibilities, shining brightly just beyond the reach of proof. Among the thousands of Harappan artifacts tucked away in museum collections, there exists a curious subset: small, crudely carved seals bearing uneven symbols that look almost childish compared to the crisp precision of typical inscriptions. The lines wobble, the curves lack symmetry, and the spacing between symbols is haphazard at best. At first glance, these might seem like cheap knockoffs or hurriedly made votive offerings, but some researchers propose a far more intimate possibility: that these are the handwriting exercises of Harappan children preserved in fired clay. If true, they could offer rare insight into how literacy was transmitted in one of the ancient world's most enigmatic societies. Take the so-called practice seals found near residential quarters in Mohenjo-Daro. Unlike the standardized unicorn and bull motifs, these diminutive pieces feature clumsily rendered versions of common symbols: a fish with lopsided fins, a jar with uneven sides. The errors mirror what we'd expect from young learners: overcorrections where the stylus slipped, repeated attempts at the same symbol, and uneven pressure betraying unsure hands. Archaeologists point to parallels in ancient Egypt, where ostraka scraps of pottery preserve schoolboys' scribbled hieroglyphs, complete with teacher corrections. Could these Harappan fragments be Bronze Age equivalents, evidence of scribble training within elite households? Yet the votive theory offers a compelling counter-argument. In later Indian traditions, pilgrims often left hastily made offerings at temple sites. Small clay tablets with rudimentary symbols meant more for devotional intent than artistic skill. Some of the cruder Harappan seals cluster near ritual platforms, their simplicity reflecting mass production for ceremonial purposes rather than pedagogy. The perforations on many suggest they were meant to be worn or hung, perhaps as protective charms. If these were sacred objects rather than school exercises, their roughness might signify humility, a deliberate contrast to the polished seals of the elite, signaling piety over precision. A third perspective complicates the puzzle further. Certain crude seals show symbols otherwise absent from the formal script: squiggles, crossed lines, or abstract shapes that defy categorization. These might represent proto-writing attempts by semi-literate artisans trying to mimic symbols they didn't fully understand. Imagine a potter commissioned to make votive seals without knowing the script, improvising glyphs that looked approximately correct. Alternatively, they could encode personal marks, the Harappan equivalent of signing an X on a document used by those outside the literate class. The most tantalizing clue lies in the archaeological context. At Harappa, a cluster of these crude seals was found beside miniature vessels and toy carts, hinting at a space where children lived or gathered. Elsewhere, they appear alongside standard administrative seals, as if apprentices worked alongside masters. The distribution resists easy categorization, suggesting these artifacts served multiple roles: teaching tools in one context, sacred tokens in another. This fluidity might be the most revealing insight of all, that in the Harappan world, the boundaries between education, ritual, and daily life were far more porous than we assume. Whether childhood exercises or humble devotions, these imperfect carvings humanize a civilization often admired for its mechanical precision. In their wobbling lines, we glimpse not just the struggles of learners or the fervor of devotees, but a society where writing, no matter how crudely rendered, bridged the mundane and the divine. For all their flaws, these tiny seals may hold the most relatable fragment of the Harappan story: the universal impulse to leave a mark, however unsteady, on the world. Among the hundreds of Harappan symbols, a handful stand out like linguistic outsiders: oddly angular glyphs bearing an uncanny resemblance to Sumerian cuneiform wedges, or the looping hieroglyphs of Easter Island's Rongorongo script. These anomalies raise a tantalizing question. Are they evidence of long-distance cultural exchange in the Bronze Age, or simply a striking case of human minds arriving at similar visual solutions across vast divides of time and space? Consider the stair-step symbol found on a handful of seals from Mohenjo-Daro. Unlike the flowing curves of most Harappan glyphs, this sign is all sharp angles, its zigzag shape mirroring early Sumerian signs for mountain or foreign land. Given that Indus merchants traded lapis lazuli and carnelian with Mesopotamian cities like where cuneiform flourished, could this be a borrowed symbol? The timing fits. These stair-step seals cluster in archaeological layers corresponding to peak trade around 2300 BCE. Even more intriguing, a broken Harappan-style seal found in Mesopotamia bears a similar angular mark alongside cuneiform, though its context remains debated. Yet the case for convergence complicates the narrative. Half a world away, the Rongorongo script of Easter Island, developed millennia later in complete isolation, includes near-identical zigzag motifs representing waves or genealogies. Human brains, it seems, default to certain universal shapes when abstracting ideas. The Indus Valley's stair-step might simply encode a local concept like water flow or ascent, its form dictated by the physics of carving soft steatite rather than cultural borrowing. The branch and fruit symbol deepens the mystery. Appearing on pottery fragments from Harappa, this glyph depicts a vertical line with radiating curved marks, startlingly similar to both Sumerian signs for tree and Rongorongo's life symbol. Proponents of contact point to the archaeologically verified exchange of crops like sesame and dates between Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley. Could the symbol have traveled with the seeds? Skeptics counter that arboreal motifs are human universals, appearing independently from Celtic ogam to Chinese oracle bones. Perhaps most enigmatic are the rare composite signs like a Harappan fish glyph cradled inside a Sumerian-style rectangle found on a seal at Lothal's dockyards. These hybrids resist easy categorization. Were they experimental fusions created for multilingual trade, or did Harappan scribes occasionally borrow foreign shapes the way modern logos might incorporate exotic typefaces for flair? The answer may lie in the middle ground. Just as Japanese kanji adapted Chinese characters to represent entirely different sounds and meanings, Harappan scribes could have repurposed encountered symbols for local use. A foreign glyph might not prove direct linguistic borrowing, but rather the creative absorption of visual ideas, a testament to the cosmopolitan imagination of the Indus Valley's traders and artisans. Until we decipher the script itself, these outlier symbols remain both cultural bridges and cognitive mirrors, reflecting humanity's shared visual language while guarding their specific secrets. Deep in the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, archaeologists made a chilling discovery. Dozens of carefully broken seals clustered at the bottom of brick-lined pits, their fragments mixed with ash and animal bone. These weren't accidental losses or the ravages of time. Each seal had been deliberately snapped along its central perforation, as if ritually killed before burial. The location makes this even more provocative. The fragments were found in what experts call ritual tanks, sunken chambers near the city's Great Bath, where evidence suggests ceremonies took place. This eerie parallel to Mesopotamian practices, where old cuneiform tablets were ceremonially drowned or burned, raises a haunting question. Did the Harappans believe written words held power that needed to be contained? The Mesopotamian comparison is irresistible. At sites like Nippur, scribes deposited obsolete temple records in consecrated water, a practice tied to their belief that writing was divine, a gift from the god Nabu. To discard tablets casually risked angering the gods. Ritual destruction was both respectful and magically prudent. If the Harappans shared this worldview, their broken seals might reflect a similar sacred protocol. Imagine a priest methodically snapping a merchant's worn-out seal over a pit, releasing its accumulated power back to the earth before a new one could be carved. The ash surrounding the fragments could hint at purification rites, paralleling Vedic fire rituals that emerged centuries later in the same region. Yet alternative explanations lurk in the debris. Forensic analysis reveals something startling. Many broken seals show where patterns inconsistent with long use prior to destruction. Some appear almost new when shattered. This opens the door to darker interpretations. Were these killed seals tokens of failed contracts or disgraced merchants? In ancient Anatolia, Hittite traders would break treaty tablets to annul agreements violently. Could Harappan elites have used ritual tanks as bureaucratic graveyards, destroying the seals of those who fell out of favor? The animal bones mixed with the fragments, often from zebu cattle, add another layer. If these were sacrificial offerings accompanying the seal breaking, the act may have carried legal weight, turning a spiritual ceremony into a form of economic execution. The script itself complicates the mystery. Unlike Mesopotamian tablets, which bore legible curses or invocations, Harappan symbols remain mute. We can't yet tell if a broken seal's inscription declared a sacred oath or merely listed grain quotas. Intriguingly, certain symbol clusters appear disproportionately among the shattered pieces, particularly the jar and plant signs. Were these markers of temple property, ritually retired when stores were redistributed? Or do they represent something more sinister, like the names of debtors whose obligations were ceremonially voided? What emerges is a potent blend of bureaucracy and belief. Whether reverent retirement of sacred objects or the systematic erasure of social bonds, these shattered seals force us to confront the Harappan's sophisticated understanding of writing's tangible power. In their world, symbols weren't just records, they were living entities capable of binding communities or summoning consequences when mishandled. The ritual tanks stand as silent witnesses to a civilization that grasped the weight of the written word millennia before our modern debates over censorship and memory. Their fragments, carefully broken and laid to rest, remind us that some silences are deliberate and some messages were never meant to last. Walk through a village in modern-day Gujarat or Rajasthan during festival season, and you might spot something startling: patterns of dots, intersecting lines, and stylized animals drawn in colored powder on doorsteps, mirroring symbols found on 4,000-year-old Harappan seals. These Rangoli designs, meant to welcome prosperity, raise a provocative question. Are we seeing fragments of an unbroken thread tying today's folk artists unknowingly to their Indus Valley ancestors, or just a cosmic coincidence of human creativity? The parallels are hard to dismiss. Take the recurring swastika motif, a symbol that appears on Harappan pottery and persists in Rangoli to this day. Unlike the Nazi appropriation, the original Harappan version spins both clockwise and counterclockwise, echoing its sacred use in Hinduism and Jainism as a solar emblem. Even more telling are the fish designs that adorn modern Bengali wedding art, their curved bodies and triangular tails nearly identical to those on Indus Valley seals. Tribal communities like the Wali and Gond carry the legacy further, painting ritual murals with horned deities and tree-of-life motifs that could be lifted straight from Mohenjo-Daro's ruins. The similarity isn't just visual, context matters too. Harappan fish symbols clustered near water rituals. Today, fish motifs still dominate monsoon festivals in coastal India, symbolizing abundance. Yet skeptics urge caution. Humans have a limited repertoire of basic geometric shapes: circles, zigzags, grids, that reappear independently worldwide. The Aboriginal dot paintings of Australia, Celtic knotwork, and Navajo sand mandalas all share elements with Harappan designs without any cultural connection. Even the unicorn motif has plausible modern explanations. Rural Rajasthani folklore speaks of single-horned guardian spirits, possibly inspired by sightings of injured antelopes missing one horn. Could these be convergent evolution of symbolism rather than direct inheritance? The tattoo traditions of South Asia's nomadic tribes add another layer. The Rabari herders of Kutch ink their skin with interconnected labyrinths strikingly similar to Harappan grid symbols, while the Bega women of Madhya Pradesh wear dotted facial patterns nearly identical to sequences found on ancient Indus pottery. Oral histories among these groups sometimes attribute the designs to the Old Ones or people of the mounds, vague but tantalizing hints of cultural memory. Linguists note even more subtle survivals. The word min, meaning both fish and star in Dravidian languages, echoes the Harappan fish symbol's potential dual meaning. Archaeologists remain divided. Some point to the 2,000-year gap between the civilization's collapse and the earliest recorded folk art as fatal to the continuity argument. Others counter that oral traditions and ritual practices can outlast empires, citing how Australian Aboriginal songlines preserved geographic knowledge for 60,000 years without writing. The truth may lie in fragments, certain symbols preserved not through conscious memory, but because they resonated deeply enough to be reinvented by each generation. What's undeniable is how these patterns still pulse with life. Whether ancient echoes or universal human gestures, they transform the Harappan script from a dead system into something alive, still speaking, if not in words, then in the stubborn persistence of shape and meaning across millennia. The folk artists who chalk these designs today may never know if their hands trace paths first laid in bronze and steatite, but in their unknowing homage, the script's legacy breathes on. In a cutting-edge lab at the University of Washington, an artificial intelligence pores over thousands of Harappan symbols, searching for hidden patterns no human eye has detected. This isn't science fiction, it's one of several ambitious projects using machine learning to tackle the Indus script's riddles. The premise is tantalizing. If modern algorithms can predict protein folds or translate dead languages like Linear B, could they finally crack a code that's defied scholars for over a century? The answer, like the script itself, is far from simple. Early attempts treated the script like a cryptographic puzzle, feeding symbol sequences into algorithms designed for decipherment. Researchers at MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Lab took this approach, training models to analyze positional patterns, how often certain glyphs appeared at the start or end of sequences, or clustered with others. The AI flagged intriguing correlations, like a jar symbol frequently preceding what might be numerals, hinting at trade records, but without semantic context knowing whether jar represented a commodity, a deity, or a phonetic syllable. The findings remained stuck in statistical limbo. More recent efforts leverage neural networks to mimic how the human brain processes writing. A team from the Indian Institute of Technology combined image recognition with natural language processing, scanning symbols for visual similarities to later Brahmi or Dravidian scripts. The AI detected striking overlaps, a Harappan arrow glyph resembling the Tamil letter Va, for example, but critics argue this risks confirmation bias. Like a conspiracy theorist seeing faces in clouds, machines can impose false connections when starved for training data. The Harappan script's brevity exacerbates this. With no lengthy texts to establish context, algorithms often see patterns that disappear under scrutiny. The most promising breakthrough came from an unexpected angle on material science. By training AI to analyze not just symbols but the seal's physical wear patterns, microscopic striations from repeated stamping, variations in clay impressions, researchers at Cambridge reconstructed potential administrative workflows. Certain symbol clusters appeared predominantly on well-worn seals from market districts, suggesting transactional use, while others appeared only on pristine ritual objects. This archaeological context awareness offers a workaround for the script's silence, inferring meaning from how and where writing was used rather than relying solely on linguistic rules. Yet fundamental roadblocks remain. Machine learning thrives on data volume, but the entire Harappan corpus contains fewer symbols than a single chapter of War and Peace. Even advanced models struggle with such sparse input. Worse, most algorithms assume the script encodes language, a premise still hotly debated. If Farmer and Sproat's non-linguistic theory holds, forcing the symbols into a phonetic framework could be like using a metal detector to study clouds, applying the wrong tool entirely. The ultimate irony, the same technology decoding the script may also explain its resistance. Just as modern AI systems develop a black box logic opaque even to their creators, the Harappan Script's original users might have operated on intuitive symbolic connections lost to time. An algorithm can spot that fish symbols cluster near water reservoirs, but without knowing whether they denoted freshwater, purity, or the sound mai, the deeper meaning stays buried. What these efforts reveal isn't just the script's complexity, but the limits of our digital tools when faced with the messy richness of ancient human communication. The machines might be getting closer, but for now, the final decipherment still waits for that elusive key, perhaps a humble potsherd lying unnoticed in some museum drawer, bearing the one inscription that could make everything click. Until then, the algorithms keep searching, not just for answers, but for better questions to ask. Imagine finally cracking the Harappan script after decades of effort, only to realize your translation might say more about your own biases than the civilization you're trying to understand. This isn't just theoretical. When British colonial scholars first attempted to decipher Egyptian hieroglyphs, they forced the symbols into familiar biblical frameworks, mistaking pharaohs for characters from Genesis. The same risk looms over Harappan studies today. If a breakthrough happens tomorrow, how do we ensure we're hearing the Indus Valley's true voice, not just an echo of our own assumptions? The ethical minefield becomes clear when examining past decipherments. Take Linear B, the ancient Mycenaean script. Early translators superimposed modern European class structures onto Bronze Age Greece, interpreting symbols as evidence of feudal kingdoms that later archaeology proved inaccurate. With the Harappan script, the stakes are higher. This could be our only window into an entire civilization's worldview. Already, ideological battles simmer beneath the surface. Hindutva nationalists push for links to Sanskrit, while Dravidian activists emphasize Tamil connections. Both camps project contemporary identity politics onto a Bronze Age culture that likely recognized neither framework. Even the term decipherment itself carries baggage. It implies the script is a puzzle to be solved, rather than a complex system to be understood on its own terms. Compounding the problem is the question of ownership. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs, which were largely deciphered by French and British scholars, the Harappan script's potential translators span Pakistani archaeologists, Indian linguists, and Western AI teams. Should priority go to scholars from the regions where the civilization thrived? Or does this risk sidelining breakthroughs from unexpected quarters, like the Finnish team that cracked the ancient Minoan-inspired Phaistos disk? The Rosetta Stone model, where outsiders unlock a culture's secrets, feels increasingly colonial in an era emphasizing indigenous epistemic rights. Yet restricting access could stall progress. After all, the last major script decipherment, Mayan glyphs, required collaboration across continents and disciplines. Perhaps the greatest ethical dilemma lies in the act of interpretation itself. If the Harappan script encodes concepts so foreign they resist easy translation, like the Inuit language's dozens of nuanced words for snow, how much meaning might we lose in rendering them into modern categories? Early attempts to translate the script's fish symbol as either a literal animal or zodiac sign already demonstrate this flattening effect. Worse still, forcing the symbols into alphabetic equivalents could erase layered meanings, like how early Chinese translators mangled Buddhist sutras by approximating Sanskrit terms with unrelated Chinese characters. Without living cultural context, each translation choice becomes an act of creative destruction, preserving some meanings while irrevocably distorting others. Some scholars argue for radical restraint, that until a bilingual inscription surfaces, any full decipherment attempt is inherently unethical. They point to the Rongorongo script of Easter Island, where overeager translations in the 1960s created false narratives that still haunt Polynesian archaeology. Others counter that leaving the script silent perpetuates a different injustice: the permanent loss of Harappan perspectives on everything from gender roles to climate resilience, knowledge that could reshape our understanding of human history. The middle path may lie in transparency, acknowledging every translation as provisional, labeling uncertainties clearly, and inviting marginalized voices from South Asian tribal communities to interdisciplinary scholars to challenge Western academic dominance. What's certain is this: the moment of decipherment, if it comes, won't be a triumphant endpoint but the start of new struggles. Like the Dead Sea Scrolls' contentious interpretations or the ongoing fights over exhibiting indigenous oral histories as text, the Harappan Script's meaning will be negotiated, not discovered. The symbols themselves may remain unchanged for millennia, but the power to decide what they say, and who gets to decide, remains one of archaeology's most urgent unanswered questions. In seeking to give voice to the past, we risk drowning it out with our own. The true test won't be whether we can read the script, but whether we're prepared to listen. From the enigmatic direction of their script, left, right, or even alternating like oxen plowing a field, to the sudden silence that swallowed their writing system whole, the Harappan Script isn't just a single mystery. It's a labyrinth of 25 interlocking riddles, each one peeling back another layer of this civilization's secrets. Think about the unicorn seals stamped by the thousands yet never naming a single king. Or the tantalizing possibility that their symbols weren't words at all, but a sophisticated emblem system like corporate logos etched in steatite. And what about those haunting pottery marks? Were they children's practice exercises or prayers pressed into clay? Then there are the gaps that defy logic. A script this advanced, used by a civilization that standardized bricks across 1,000 kilometers, yet not a single lengthy text survives. No epic poems, no tax records, no royal decrees, just cryptic fragments that might be cargo manifests or sacred incantations. The astronomical theories, the trade encryption, the ritual shattering of seals, every proposed explanation opens 3 more questions. Even the fish symbol, so simple and recurring, could be a grocery list notation, a constellation marker, or a phonetic pun lost to time. But here's what makes these riddles electric: they're not dead ends. They're invitations. Every broken seal, every symbol cluster, every stroke order variation is a thread waiting to be tugged. Maybe the key lies in a yet undug city's archive, or in an algorithm sifting through symbols for patterns no human eye can see. Or maybe, just maybe, it's in the folk art of a Gujarati village, where Rangoli designs still trace shapes that haven't faded in 4,000 years. The Harappans didn't just leave us a script. They left us a mirror. Each unanswered question forces us to confront how much we project onto the past, assuming kings must boast, writing must record speech, and power must shout its name. What if their silence is the message? A civilization that thrived without monuments to ego, that maybe encoded wisdom in symbols meant to be felt, not just read. So here's where you come in. Which riddle grips you most? The billboard at Dolivera shouting its silent proclamation, the eerie parallels between Harappan glyphs and Masonic symbols, or the possibility that we've been misreading their script altogether? Drop your wildest theories below, because history's greatest puzzles aren't solved in isolation. They're cracked by collective curiosity, one inspired guess at a time. The Harappans may have left no Rosetta Stone, but they gifted us something better, a mystery that refuses to die, and the thrill of chasing answers just out of reach.